change your associations. Most medical professionals are broke. And if you're asking your colleague for financial advice or student loan advice, etc., you're probably going to get a bad answer. You need to very intentionally put yourself around people who are doing well with money if you want to do well with money. You'll learn a whole host of things that you had no idea you didn't know about just by being a part of the conversation.
Hey everybody, welcome to season 2 of Wealth Unfiltered. I'm Samantha Parinello, and today I have an incredible guest for you. Her story is not just inspiring, but it will resonate with so many. So please help me welcome to the show the founder of Millionaires in Medicine, Kristen Burton. Hi.
Hi, Samantha. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to be here. I actually feel like this is going to be such a wonderful, wonderful episode for our listeners because, like I said, your story resonates with everyone, not just people in medicine, but when the majority of people go to high school, then they go to college, then they find themselves in debt, and then they start their careers. And I feel like it's something that everyone really can relate to. So your story, I want you to tell. I don't want to be the one to tell it, but I would really love if you could kind of take us back to maybe that part of your life where your mindset was, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, so I graduated from PA school in 2016. I had done like the standard undergrad and then 3 years of graduate school, so I was around 25. And the whole time you were in like school, training, whatever, it was, I'm going to get the income right at the end. I'm going to have this big 6-figure income. And when that happens, I'm going to be well off, which I think people can relate to in a lot of fields. But I got there and pretty quickly realized that between the student loan payment and just like what was taken out for taxes, I didn't actually feel well off at all. And I didn't know how really to fix the problem. The only financial resource that I could put my hands on at the time was Dave Ramsey. And so I said, okay, well, here's an option. Pay off my loans as fast as humanly possible. And when it's done, I'll free up the cash flow, right, that I was paying to my student loan payment, and then I will be wealthy. So I tried that. I very aggressively tried that. We, at the time, lived on $35,000 a year. So I've inflation adjusted that. It's like 40-some thousand now. But we were very frugal. And I worked a lot, like 80 hours a week. And we ended up paying $161,000 in student loan debt off in 16 months.
Wow.
Which is really fast.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we celebrated and everything felt really good for like a few weeks. And then I realized I'm still not wealthy.
Right.
All I did was really take the net worth statement liability side up to zero. It really did nothing else to create freedom from having to go to work, to create cash flow that came from something else besides like me seeing patients. And so I took a moment of reflection and realized, okay, I'm not going to say that this was a mistake. That's probably too aggressive of a statement, but this wasn't the path. So what is? And then that's when I took a really deep dive into what it actually looks like to build assets and build wealth rather than just pay off debt.
And how do you feel like, being someone who worked 80 hours, how did you find the time to even contemplate like trying to build your wealth?
That's a good question. Well, first off, I spent a lot of time in call rooms by myself. So that gave me plenty of time to really think about life in general. But, at the time, I think I had most of those shifts and most of that extra work season of my life. I really hadn't even thought about the wealth building part yet. And it wasn't until I really took a step back and backed off of working those extra shifts and lifted up my head to realize wow, I made it to this point. It just wasn't what I thought it was going to be, that I started reallocating some of that time I had been spending at work into actually learning some stuff about money.
So at that time, is that when you decided to really start making personal investments, or was this I need to start helping other people? I can't be the only one.
I'll say a little bit of both. I started really building my own investment portfolio, but then along the way, it was kind of a circular pattern where I would realize, okay, I've created some success in this area and I'm going to keep building this and take this to the next level. But then people around me, mostly, honestly, in medicine at the hospital I worked at, started seeing that I'd had some success and asking for help. And that's kind of when I realized there's a need here.
Yeah.
And there, in my space, there's not a lot of people speaking to the six-figure earner with six figures of student loan debt.
Right.
There's a lot of personal finance education that's physician-centric, but for people who don't have quite that income potential, but still have a lot of student loan debt, have a different training structure, there's nothing, right? And so that's really where I saw a need and then sought to fill it with personal finance education that's really for us.
You're the founder of Millionaires in Medicine, but was that the start back then, or did you start with a different company first?
So I have rebranded. The initial company name was Strive Coaching. And over time, I realized this doesn't really tell people what it is we do. Our goal is to help people become millionaires in medicine. And so we should call ourselves Millionaires in Medicine. So we rebranded.
Okay, I love that. So people will see a history where it was the coaching, but that has been what you've morphed into what you're doing now with Millionaires in Medicine. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about when you first started yourself and then how you grew that and then brought people along with you.
Yeah, when I first started the wealth building process myself, it was so simple. It was really genuinely, how can we have a really high investing rate, and B, manage our own portfolio of low-cost index funds and ETFs so that we can have really minimal fee drag and simultaneously build our investment portfolio quickly, which is not easy to do, but it is quite simple to do. And so that's what we did. We invested at least 50% of our income for years and years and years, quite a long time. Even after having kids, we still maintained an investing rate that high.
Oh, wow.
And so we pretty quickly saw like, wow, we're getting some traction here. You know, when you invest 50% of two incomes, you end up building a portfolio pretty quickly. And at that point, we started to realize, okay, this is taking us somewhere. We've kind of passed the point of being able to say, you know, we've hit coast fire, or like the ability to have an early semi-retirement, things like that several times over. And people started asking like, well, how did you do that? How are you not going to have to work until 65, et cetera? And so it transitioned from me just doing those things by myself to, well, let me show you, because really any medical professional has the aptitude to do the exact same thing. You know, I'm not like smarter than anyone else or anything along those lines. It's just a matter of a new skill set. You know, we all have proven once we can learn things. We can apply the same principles here.
How did you make that shift into the financial mindset? And honestly, I guess learn more about that. Because I feel like that is one of the obstacles people find. They're like, A, I don't have time, which is probably number one reason why people don't fulfill their like dream. But also too, like they're like, I'm a medical professional. So like, how am I going to do this?
That's a good question. I think that is basically like at its core saying, how do I put away my imposter syndrome and like do something different, you know? Because there was a part of me that's like, this isn't my wheelhouse. Am I ever going to be good at this? But after you put in, you know, 10,000 hours of work, so to speak, you feel like, okay, my confidence has built.
Yeah.
And I'm able to say this as a part of my skill set too. So it was a combination of things for me. Probably hundreds of books, thousands of hours of podcasts. I paid for my own courses, coaching, etc. Went to conferences, joined real estate investing groups. Like I did things to put myself in circles with people who were really good at this stuff so that I could also become good at this stuff. But it was not like an overnight thing. It took me really, honestly, years to build up the knowledge base to really feel like I knew what I was talking about.
And so part of your story that I've read is that you became a millionaire at 31, which is like an incredible milestone. As part of the people and the network that you're with, there's people who are like, okay, how do I do this too? So for people who want to do it too, how do they get involved with Millionaires in Medicine?
Well, we have a bunch of free stuff. The easiest thing to do is just follow us on Instagram at Millionaires in Medicine. We usually launch a free resource once per week. We have a Millionaires in Medicine club we host on the Platform School, where we have free live events and, again, like post free resources on a weekly basis. So it's really easy to get started and get learning. But the millionaire milestone is an interesting one because you guys are in the real estate space. It is one of those things where, depending on the world of money that you're in, it's either a goal or not a goal. I like Millionaires in Medicine because, you know, most people have to become millionaires in order to create financial independence. But it is one of those things where if you're in certain circles, you're going to talk about goals in terms of cash flow. Other circles, you're going to talk about goals in terms of net worth. and everything in between. So yes, it is becoming a millionaire is a lot of folks' goal. There's way different modalities that you can take to create, financial independence and success. But ultimately, if you want the quick path, we've got a bunch of free resources to help you get started.
That's amazing. So when you talk to so many people who you've helped and coached, what have been some of the biggest mistakes or misconceptions from when they start with you?
The biggest money mistakes most medical professionals make, honestly, are revolving around like the big overhead and not so much little tiny things. Probably the biggest gap is student loan strategy. There's a lot of folks who are not aware of the opportunities available if you have federal student loan debt to be a little bit strategic and creative in how you approach that. And so there's an assumption that, okay, if I have student loans, I need to pay them off quickly. You close a lot of doors that way. And even for people who think they're employing student loan strategy, they're missing really key pearls, like tiny little needle movers that will change the total cost of repayment by 80,000, 100,000 plus. That's a big category of mistake. Another one is assuming the lifestyle of a seasoned clinician when you've been a clinician for 5 minutes, right? So like choosing the house, the car, et cetera, based on your colleague who's had the income for 10 years.
Right.
10 minutes, you're not quite there yet, but you do it anyways. And then the third, honestly, big mistake I see is folks that end up with a lot of credit card debt, a new grad, either because they've used that to facilitate the gap in between training and income, or I even met a nurse practitioner who put her entire education on credit cards instead of student loans and everything in between. Having that high credit card balance as an early graduate makes it really tricky to start building wealth and getting ahead.
I've never heard of that before, actually. That's
I know. Yeah, you just said, hey, I didn't have a lot of financial literacy. My parents didn't go to college. I really didn't know how student loans worked, but I knew I had credit cards. And so she just paid all of her tuition on credit cards and ended up with this, $60,000, $70,000 credit card balance just because
high interest, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. And it's like, gosh, it's tough. But a lot of people are facing that where it's like, I'm supposed to solve this big financial problem of paying for school or paying for loans. And like, just no one teaches us anything about that.
Well, and I feel like that is not only with, the medical professionals, but almost any specialized field. The education is so focused on that specialization, but no one talks about the financial piece. But you're going into a world where you want a career, where you would really like to have financial literacy, where you maybe want to operate your own business. Like most people who are physicians eventually say, I want my own practice, but they have absolutely no business skills because that wasn't part of the curriculum. Do you feel like that is a major challenge that you see from the people you're helping?
It's such a challenge, and it's such a catch-22 because we all want the cost of education to be lowered, right? Like it's becoming astronomical what it costs for you to go to college, go to graduate school, et cetera. And then with the changes to the federal student loan system, now we're capping federal student loans. So there's this gap of like, how do I even get a professional degree with a student loan cap? But at the same time, we want the cost to go down and we're trying to truncate program lengths and kind of squeeze everything into the smallest amount of time. We feel like we don't have time for anything extra, including personal finance, which almost everyone would benefit from. But it's like, where does it fit when we're trying to cut things and there's so much like medicine to learn or whatever field you're in?
Are you looking to build sustainable wealth and achieve financial freedom? Viking Capital can help you do just that through multifamily investing. With a team of seasoned real estate experts, Viking Capital conducts deep financial analysis and data-driven asset management to deliver outstanding returns. Their strategy focuses on low-risk opportunities with significant value-add potential, preserving your capital while maximizing long-term growth. Join them and be part of a success story. Viking Capital has acquired 30 properties and manages over 6,000 units, all thanks to their dedicated team and valued investors. Discover their current deal offerings at vikingmultifamily.com and start your journey to financial freedom today.
We talked a little bit about the challenges that you're seeing, but I'd love to hear maybe about one or two success stories of people who have you've helped through their journey.
Oh yeah. I could tell you a bunch of these. So we used one-on-one coaching and so we don't do that anymore, but that's afforded me a front row seat to be able to actually see people's lives intimately changed by this. So for an example, we had a PA come in with $350,000 of student loan debt. She had almost no investments. She was in private practice dermatology and was just kind of stagnating. She was about 30 with projected to have only like a few $100,000 invested when she landed at retirement had she kept up her system. And she felt like, I cannot succeed because my student loan payment is massive. As you can imagine, on a standard 10-year plan, the student loan payment on $350,000 is a lot for a private practice PA salary. And so we ended up helping her facilitate a job in the same subspecialty at a non-for-profit. Hard to find in the dermatology space, but possible. That allowed her to pursue public service loan forgiveness. That allowed her to switch to an income-driven repayment plan while still saving money rather than spending more on her loans. And subsequently dropped her total cost of loan repayment by like $300,000, but freed up thousands of dollars a month that she then redirected to investing. So nothing changes about her lifestyle, but she's able to now invest thousands of dollars a month. She's able to pay thousands of dollars less in student loan debt, save a ton of money, actually got a tiny bit of a raise with the job move. And it's like, didn't have to do the beans and rice thing, right? But completely changed from being on the path to having nothing at retirement to being on the path to having multiple millions, and all just a few key levers. I think a lot of people think if I'm going to succeed with money, I have to like eat ramen noodles and never travel. But it's like, it's not true. You just have to pull the right strings sometimes. And she's a great example of having to change nothing about discretionary spending and still getting like a huge transformation and result.
Yeah, that's incredible. I have two cousins who are both in the medical field. One's a doctor, new doctor, and one is a PA. And that is something that we have often talked about, is about the financial piece of like, because we're, Chris and I are in the investment world. So they're always like bending our ear about investments and like how they can get started with it. And that's the number one thing that they both say all the time. They're like, I just don't know. Like, I don't have no idea what to do with this. And like, they talk about their loans. They also talk about, the markets they're in. So they both live in California, their taxes. Like, there's just so many different issues that people, I think, aren't really educated about. And then so finding success stories like that, I feel like are so not just inspirational, but very cool, because I think it helps people realize that you're not stuck and you don't have no options. It's about finding the resources to do so. So I'm actually definitely going to send them your way, because I do think it's really exciting to have somebody who's also in your field to also tell you some of this stuff. You were talking a little bit about investments. And one of the things that I'd like to know more about from you is when you're helping people or just in your own personal investment world, what are the assets that you're typically investing in, and what does your portfolio look like now?
Yeah, so when people start in the world of medicine, I think you can almost never go wrong with choosing a diversified portfolio of index funds and ETFs, utilizing your tax-deferred accounts, and then also building a taxable brokerage. You almost just can't go wrong. It's so easy to do. And the way that investing in the stock bond market has shifted over the last few decades, it's like, this is accessible to everyone. You can go buy an ETF for $20. With $20, you can open up an account at Fidelity, Vanguard for no account fees. You can structure all of this with like 25 hours of learning on your own with very little risk and very little capital required. So it's like the beautiful first start for most folks. What we ended up doing is, once we had created some traction there and we said, okay, I've mentioned like that Coast Fire term. We've hit that several times over. We wanted to move into the cash flow investing space. Then we started adding in investments in actual physical property. We personally used short-term rentals because that allowed us quite a bit of tax savings using the short-term rental tax loophole versus long-term. And then we also are LPs in multifamily syndication. Those things came a little bit later for us, particularly with owning physical property. We learned the hard way. It's like the potential unexpected expense that can occur can be quite large. And especially with short-term rentals, your cash flow can be pretty variable. So if you don't have deep enough pockets to stomach that and to like work with those ebbs and flows, the physical property idea can be a little bit, riskier. And so I think for a lot of folks, it's an easy play to start with a very simple portfolio, building your cash reserves, building your cash flow systems. And then once you're there and you feel like I have a little bit of security, you can move into almost anything, right? Like we chose those modalities through real estate investing, but like you can go out and buy a self-service car wash, you can go buy a mobile home park. Like there's a million ways to create a cash flowing investment. You just have to be willing to take a little bit of time to recognize before you dive in, this is a new skill set. I need to approach it as such and make sure that I'm informed. I know how to do due diligence and all those things. Otherwise, like anything, you'll end up making big mistakes. But if you're willing to put the effort in and spend a little bit of time learning or find resources to help, there are endless ways to build wealth.
So you touched on some of the things that people could do to have like riskier things like the active real estate piece, and what kind of risk that comes with. But what is maybe one of the biggest mistakes that you've made and that you've learned from? Like, what is something that you're like, man, had I known this, I would not have done that?
I'll give you two of my own personal mistakes. Once I pulled some money out of our after-tax account to utilize as a down payment on a short-term rental. Had I known better, I would have done an S block and not paid the taxes. That was one. The other one, we did some short-term rental projections using very common tools, AirGNA, DataRabu, etc. And because of the way the property was classified on the Airbnb platform and the way rooms were blocked, our projections were inaccurate, which is a big deal when you're projecting cash flow. So I will say those are probably the two biggest mistakes we've made from an investing standpoint to date. At the end of the day, they're learning experiences, and it's you're better for it.
Since you guys have started versus now, how have the Airbnb like rentals that you're doing, how have those been treating you? Because I know that there's kind of been a big ebb and flow.
Yeah, we just sold them.
Did you?
Yes, there has been an ebb and flow. And Airbnb as a platform is very guest friendly and less user or host friendly. And so even they just actually announced a new update recently with a change in fee structure. So that process had gotten to the point that we felt like we didn't want to mess with it any longer. We self-managed our properties, and while you can automate a lot of it and get the total amount of time down pretty reasonably, it still felt like not the best move for us. We're obviously in a season of very small children, and we decided we didn't want to allocate the time that way. I will say I've had some folks that have still done really, really well in the short-term rental space, but they're really creative. Like, for example, they'll have, when you log into the internet at the property, an email opt-in. And so then now they have an email list and they'll take the second booking off platform. Or people that, for example, have their own landing page for their listing and will like drive traffic to it with meta ads or something else to generate additional bookings off platform. You can get creative. I'm not saying short-term rentals are dead, but there are some downsides to Airbnb.
We've been talking about maybe like 7 to 10 years ago. It was just something that was so booming. That was like Chris and I did it for a short time before we actually moved down and started, we're going to do all passive. We've decided no more active for us. We're going to do all passive. But it was lucrative and it made a lot of sense at the time. But I do find that more and more people are, moving away from the active side of things. It's also just like you were saying, it's also kind of difficult with you don't know who's coming in and out of your home and your property. So I think it makes it a little bit more, not just difficult, but challenging in a way where you're like emotionally drained a little bit more than you would be if you just could just set it and forget it like passive investing does.
Yes, you're definitely in the hospitality space, and like you're messaging someone at 2 a.m, like, how did you go through 17 rolls of toilet paper one day? Need more, we actually one time we were burglarized with, yeah, it's a wild story. But our property manager like pulled up to deal with a guest issue and the home was being like actively burglarized. They emptied out the entire home. Appliances were removed. It's crazy. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, we decided this has been fun. Let's all move on from this phase of life.
Wow. Well, so speaking of phases of life and things that you're doing, so have you completely shifted away from medicine, or what is your journey like now?
No, I actually work part-time and I just transitioned. I'm in the process of transitioning from critical care medicine back into cardiology. So I do still do medicine. I actually really love medicine. And I think that the only reason I still love medicine is because I have command of how much I work and I'm able to pick jobs based on a schedule that suits my lifestyle, not necessarily based on income, which has afforded me, I think, the ability to avoid burnout despite critical care being ranked typically top 5 for subspecialties that have the highest burnout rates.
You led me exactly into my next question. I was going to say, burnout is such a challenge for anyone in the medical field because your hours are just absolutely insane. How are you helping people to figure out other ways or bring in income to help mitigate that?
Well, first, actually, financial stress, there's a lot of data that financial stress is actually a really big driver of medical burnout. And most people don't realize that. They think it's like the number of patients that they have to see or the level of EMR documentation. Those things matter, but actually, your financial stress adds a lot. And so, even nothing else changes, income doesn't change. Even just the ability for you to have a financial plan in place makes a big difference. There was actually a study that looked at this with student loan debt, and with all other factors the same, even the amount of student loan debt staying the same, just having a student loan strategy significantly reduced anxiety and depression. Wow. Which is interesting. So sometimes it's just the plan and not changing the variables. But also, there are so many modalities for increasing your income using your clinical skills without using clinical shifts to do it. We actually just had a live event about this and talked about some what I call like high leverage side hustles. Things like being an expert witness for medical malpractice cases, being a speaker for a pharmaceutical device or drug. Those types of side hustles you can't do unless you're a clinician because you need the knowledge to do. But they're flexible. They pay typically like 5 times as much an hour as clinical work does at least. Yeah, and then it's fun. Like I was a speaker, for example, and literally just go to dinners with other medical professionals. You give a talk, you network, you eat a steak. Like there's just not a lot not to love about that. And you get paid really well to do it. So finding those little niches can allow you to earn more money without feeling like, oh, I just need to work an extra Saturday at the hospital.
What are some resources that you could like tell someone if they're listening, they're like, man, I would love to do that. Like, where could they even start?
For speaking for pharma, I would say anything that Tom Caravella puts out, all of his work is really focused on transitioning to the pharmaceutical industry as a main job. But his tips will allow you to network your way into pharma in general to get those gigs. And then in terms of expert witness, it varies. I networked my way in from literally a colleague who had a lot of connections. But Dr. Gretchen Green is a former radiologist. She helps medical professionals get into that space and is very, very knowledgeable. So I would say those 2 resources specific to those side hustles. I'm not like getting paid to say that or something, but they're very genuinely helpful.
That's amazing. So, you know, one of the things that I read about you was that you have, you know, not only do you love medicine and you have a beautiful family, but you also happen to have some cool hobbies. You like wine. And you are actually, I don't know if you've done it yet, but are you doing the certification to become a sommelier? Is that true?
I'm level 2. I'm working on my level 3.
Okay.
I'm guessing we have some things in common because I saw that you used to be involved with Michelin star restaurants. And so I'm sure your food and wine taste is very elevated.
Yes, it's like part of like my soul, my being. I'm definitely a foodie, a wine connoisseur. So I read that about you and I was like, oh, we could be friends. Like
I thought the same thing when I saw that. It's like, yes, that is probably our favorite thing to do, actually. Of all the things that like my husband and I could do for fun, we love to travel and like when we're there, drink wine that doesn't export and just eat and like preferably love our kids, but preferably without kids and their preferences, right?
Speaking of traveling and wine and all the things, you know, one of the things that I think physicians really want is like that freedom. They're like, well, I make enough money. I should be able to do this. But how do they either budget it in or find the time to truly go and do those things?
Well, in terms of time, I think that if you think you don't have time as a physician, you should. I mean, almost even the people with the most robust call schedules have PTO, right? So you should have the ability to like physically take the time. I think for a lot of folks, it's a question of feeling like they can't fit into the budget. And for us, it's a matter of like prioritizing things. We could have made shifts in like overhead expenses, for example, but ultimately elected to say like, hey, we'd rather have a really robust travel budget and be able to dine at really nice places when we do. And so we just intentionally chose to redirect more funds there and, you know, drive a used car or something along those lines. So I think you can make it work. Also, we live in a world where you can travel hack your way to most places. So there's all sorts of resources. I have used, whether it be credit card points, or I use a platform called Going for flights. I once got flights from Indy to Barcelona for $350 on there. You can make it happen financially, I think, if you're willing to get a little bit creative. But you have to recognize that you probably can't have like the fanciest house, the fanciest car, the fanciest travel, the fanciest dining all at once.
Right.
You know, if you just like piece it together in a way that fits in with your joy preferences, you can usually make all of it happen. It just might not be all the exact same time.
No, that's, I think, great advice. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I have a couple more questions for you. So I would like to know, someone who has come from $150,000 or more of debt to where you are today, what is one financial habit that you swear by?
I think I have two, I guess. They both sound really small because they both probably take 5 minutes. One, I've been doing this since the debt payoff days. I call it the scrounge. At the end of the month, when we look at our cash flow statement, anything that was left over on any budgeting category that wasn't spent, I scrounge it up and I just drop it in our brokerage account. Or back then, it was like drop it towards the student loan debt. That seems actually pretty small because it's usually like $300 a month, right? It's a very small amount of money, but I actually think that that's been a big driver of success over time, is just having that principle in place of like no dollar gets left behind type of thing. The other one I would say is actually color coding or a net worth statement, which again, 5-minute task, but any income producing asset I'll color code as green. And other stuff I have different colors for, like use assets will be a different color, primary residence, car, whatever else will be different shades. And that allows me 2 seconds to look at our net worth statement and go, are we building wealth? Because if a lot of it isn't green, you're not really doing much. Like there's a big difference from being a millionaire from your primary residence and being a millionaire from cash flowing investments. So having the green boxes kind of staring you in the face, I think it helps keep the 30,000-foot view of what are we doing here with money and are we moving in the right direction?
No, I think those are fantastic. I love that. I'm very much the person who's like color code my life, and I'm the note person and the color coding person. So I'm actually going to have to tell my husband. He's the one who does like our finances, which is probably like shame on me, but he just is. He's that person for me. So I'm like, actually, my input's going to be, let's color code it now.
Color code it. And I'm telling you, it helps. If you're a visual person, it's nice to have that one glance of like, oh no, nothing is green on this page. We need to make some changes.
I love that. So my final question for you is, if you could give one piece of advice to medical professionals, whether they are, right now currently in the debt situation that you were in when you started, or they're just starting their wealth building journey, what would it be?
Change your associations. Most medical professionals are broke. And if you're asking your colleague for financial advice or student loan advice, et cetera, you're probably going to get a bad answer. You need to very intentionally put yourself around people who are doing well with money if you want to do well with money. You'll learn a whole host of things that you had no idea you didn't know about just by being a part of the conversation. So I will say, more than any like tactic, strategy, skill, that's the one thing. Just change your circle.
I love that. Great advice. And thank you so much for your time, Kristen. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'm sure the listeners did too. And for everyone who wants to connect with you or use your services, can you give them one more time where they can find you?
Yes, we are online at millionairesinmedicine.com. We're on Instagram as well at millionairesinmedicine.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And Kristen, thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. We truly appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with your friends. Until next time.